Oh, hey Simon! Bikes! Welcome back. Today we're going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to teach you how to do wheelies. Or at least how to practice wheelies, because it's going to take some time. The first thing we're going to talk about is your bike setup before you get started. One thing you should note is that you want to practice on flat pedals so that it's easy to bail off the bike if you need it. The next thing is the gearing, and wheelies have two components. There's the wheel lift, and then there's also sustaining the wheelie. So when you get started and you're just working on the wheel lift, it's easier to start in an easy gear because that will help the front end come up easier. But when you're ready to sustain your wheelie, that's easier in a medium or a harder gear. So you want to start in an easy gear and then work your way up. And the last thing is your seat height. So most people prefer to wheelie with their seat about 2/3 of the way up. And this is for a couple of reasons. One is it's really hard to get smooth pedal strokes when your leg is fully extended and your seat's all the way up. This is just a little thing, but when I was practicing, I had my seat angled down quite a bit for, good morning. I had my seat angled down a little bit because it was easier for me to do longer rides like that, but for wheelies I found that with my seat angled down, I kept sliding into the cockpit. So if this happens to you and you're fighting it, you can bring your seat up to more of like a level angle. A lot of bikes can wheelie. I'm on a full suspension, but a hardtail or fully rigid works just fine. Any of the wheel sizes work. The thing that's really helpful is if you have a bike with an adjustable seat height and some gears to choose from. If you're just getting comfortable with wheelies, I recommend starting on grass because it'll help your mental game. It'll feel a little safer to fall backwards on grass than on the road. I really preferred dried grass because it rolled a lot faster and it was easier for me to get the front wheel up, but I still felt safe. Then when you're feeling comfortable and you're ready to start sustaining your wheelie, you can take it to a road or a parking lot, and this is going to help your bike roll faster, and it's also going to be a smoother surface. So the rear brake is an important part of this equation because it's going to keep you from looping out if you go too far back. So when you're coasting along before you start your wheel lift, you want to set your rear brake at the spot right before it engages. So I'm just going to pull the lever in to the point where it's not actually slowing my bike down, but it's ready if I need it. The second part of this is once my rear brake is set, I'm going to use my front brake to cut any extra speed that I don't want before lifting the wheel. And this is important because when you're first learning to bring the front wheel up, it's a lot easier to do that at a slower speed than a faster speed. Coasting along, I'm going to set my rear brake, I'm going to cut extra speed with my front brake, compress my chest towards the bars, pedal and lean back. And then I use my rear brake to bring the front wheel back down. The most critical part of a wheelie is your first pedal stroke. You need a powerful and smooth pedal stroke to get the front wheel up straight. So what I want to look at is where your feet are actually starting. If you start here, that's probably not going to give you enough range of motion to get the front wheel up very high on your first pedal stroke. So most people like to start somewhere around 12 o'clock. I personally actually start with my feet staggered back even further so that by the time I'm into the stroke and applying power through the bike, I get the full range of motion. So I'm going to show you the difference and what that looks like on the bike. If you start here, you can see where the power engaged in the bike. And this time I'm going to start with my feet straight up and down, 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. right here. So it's definitely better, but I'm gonna need a little bit more than that. For me, in my perfect world, I'm starting with my feet actually staggered back even more, and that gave me the power I needed to bring the front wheel up. So now that we've got a powerful pedal stroke, the next thing we're gonna do is add in the upper body. So for this, we're gonna compress our chest toward the bars, and then we're gonna shift our weight back as we pedal forward. And this is a tricky part because it requires a lot of timing and it requires some commitment. The other part of training your mind and body is knowing that you can hop off the back of the bike if you need to. So sometimes you come in and you just give it too much. I'm so graceful. And so it's important to know that you can get off the back of the bike if you need to. Now we're going to talk about troubleshooting, because wheelies are hard, they take a long time, and you're probably going to run into at least a few of these scenarios. I want to show you a few things that might be holding you back from your wheelie. The first scenario is you might not be getting enough compression toward the bars. It's a party. And in this scenario, you're just not getting enough weight shift rearward to bring the front wheel up. One of the next most common problems is keeping your shoulders pointed down towards the ground. Anytime you're trying to do a wheelie and your shoulders are pointed down, you're pushing your front wheel back into the ground. Another really common problem is that your bike will often veer off to the side. It might look kind of like this. And that's usually caused by uneven pressure through your hands when you're pulling up. The best way to fix this is to have a more powerful pedal stroke so that the bike's coming up straighter with your pedals versus pulling unevenly on your hands. The next common problem, and this is probably the biggest one, is locking your arms with a bend. What that's going to do is send kind of a harsh jerking motion through your body when you get up into the wheel lift. The more you bend your arms, the closer the bars are to your chest, so the tighter your V is, and it's harder to balance here. If you straighten your arms, you can get a wider V and a better balance point. The other thing with locking your arms is that by engaging all of these muscles, you've created this tension in your upper body. And when you want to sustain your wheelie, you really need to be loose and relaxed. And that way, when the bike starts to move a little bit, your body can respond. When you're bringing your bike into a wheelie, you don't want to push on the handlebars or pull them into your body. So you don't want to compress your front fork into the ground, and you also don't want to pull it up towards your body. Even though my bike got up into the balance point, I'm not really balanced because my bike and my body are so cramped together, and we've made such a tight V that I won't be able to balance it. Another common problem is not actually reaching the balance point, and then you just end up chasing the front wheel as it's falling. You can see there that I never actually got to the balance point, and that's why I had to pedal faster and faster trying to keep the front wheel up, but that one's never going to work. If your bike feels really heavy, try an easier gear. Your butt shouldn't come off the seat in order to lift the wheel. Starting in an easy gear will help you develop the timing and coordination you need, and then you can slowly work your way up to a medium gear. thing I want to mention, if you're still struggling to get the front wheel up, get a slow-mo video of yourself and look at your timing, because it might be that the power transfer from your pedals is happening before your weight shift back, or vice versa. Well, we got party laps going on. So most of these problems boil down to one common denominator, which is your upper body doing too much. So it's helpful to focus on having a really powerful initial pedal stroke driven entirely by your feet. And this is going to help you keep your upper body loose and relaxed. The biggest barrier to wheelies is just setting the wrong expectation up front. This took me about 5 months to learn with dedicated practice. So you can wheelie too, but you got to put in the time. So now we're just going to have a little fun and ride some wheelies and talk about how you can get from getting to the balance point to actually sustaining that wheelie. Cha-cha-cha-ching! No! There's a wall here. We'll just do our best in this space. There are 3 things that help me really sustain the wheelie, and the first one is getting comfortable feathering the rear brake. So I made a little game for myself where I'd bring the front wheel up into the balance point and I would practice feathering the rear brake and see how many times I could pull it without dumping it back down to the ground. This way I'm kind of training my brain to use just the right amount of rear brake without dumping it. The second thing that really helped me sustain the wheelie is to drop my weight into my seat. And the way I learned this was maybe a little bit embarrassing because I'd go out and practice wheelies and I realized by the end of it, my feet were numb. Okay, so when you first come up into the wheelie, your pressure is in your feet and your hands because you're pedaling really hard with your feet and you're hanging with your hands. So you've got a lot of weight here and here. But once you get up to the balance point, you need to drop your weight into your seat. And what that's going to do is anchor your body right over your rear axle. So it's going to make your wheelie a lot more stable and relaxed. So the last thing that really helped me crack this code was how I held onto the grips. So we talked a little bit before about how we don't want to push the fork into the ground and we don't want to pull the bars towards our body, but we want this hanging feeling. When you're hanging from a pull-up bar, all the pressure is just in the hooks of your hands, and it's the same thing here. So you can practice doing it just like this. You can put your seat down and just press it against your hip and hang from the bars. And this is the exact feeling you want when you're up in the wheelie. All the pressure is on the front of the handlebars and your palm isn't gripping or squeezing. You don't actually want full contact around your grip. You just want it through maybe your middle and ring fingers. So to wrap it all up, when you're ready to start sustaining your wheelie, you've got a few things to think about. The first is practice modulating your rear brake so that you can use just the right amount so that you don't dump your front tire. The second thing is use your body weight to anchor yourself over your rear axle by dropping your weight into your seat and taking some of that pressure out of your hands and your feet. And then the third thing is practice the feeling of hanging off the bars. When you're hanging off the bars, that's when your body's going to be light and loose and relaxed and ready to move with the bike. Now we're just going to ride around town and have a little fun and practice what we learned. Oh, hey Simon.